James, a 14-year-old boy from a small town, had an exceptional passion for technology. In his room, among the scattered tools and old gadgets, his personal laboratory was unfolding. He could spend hours disassembling old devices, studying their structure and trying to understand how they work. The internet was his source of knowledge, and every video tutorial or article about new technologies was a step closer to his dream. His ambition was not limited to enthusiasm. James believed that technology could change lives, solve complex problems, and help people. He wanted to become an engineer who would create the devices of the future, the ones that would open up new horizons and change the world. But his family lived modestly, and the latest gadgets remained out of his reach. He could only dream of holding them in his hands one day. One day, James saw an advertisement on the internet. A new tech store had opened in a neighboring town, where he could see the latest devices. In his eyes, this place became a real paradise. Shiny laptops, powerful smartphones, everything that had previously been only in pictures was now real and available for inspection. He knew he had to see this place with his own eyes. His mother, although she didn't have much money, supported her son's aspirations. She gave him some money for the bus and said, "You deserve this, James. But be careful." Her words were full of warmth but also anxiety. She knew that life in their society was not always fair and that her son might face difficulties because of prejudice. James set out on his journey early in the morning. The bus, which moved past fields and forest roads, seemed like a tunnel to a new world. His heart beat faster as he approached the city. It was a big place, much bigger than his home. At every step he saw new opportunities that this city breathed. The hardware store was even bigger than he could have imagined. The large facade with its glass doors and shiny display cases seemed like a gateway to another world. James felt a mixed sense of fear and excitement. He gathered all his strength and crossed the threshold. Inside the store was spacious and modern. Stands of gadgets shone under the soft light of lamps. James moved between them as if he were in a museum, every detail fascinating him. He touched the devices, pressed the buttons, and imagined how they worked. His dream was so close that he could feel it, but his fascination was quickly interrupted. One of the store employees, a tall man with a reserved but cold look, approached him. His gaze was appraising and his voice was dry. "Can I help you?" he asked, but it sounded more like a formality than a sincere offer of help. James, a little embarrassed, replied, "I'm just looking. I really like these gadgets." The store employee did not answer and only nodded briefly. Then he turned and walked away, leaving James with the feeling that something was wrong. But he decided to ignore it and continue to look at the devices. James continued to move between the storefronts, stopping at each stand with the latest devices. His hands trembled with excitement as he touched the screens of tablets or the keyboards of laptops. He had always dreamed of seeing such advanced technology with his own eyes, and this moment was a real treat for him. However, he began to notice that something had changed in the store. People who had been busy doing their own thing were now paying attention to him more often. James felt a few appraising and perhaps even disdainful glances. Especially the employee who had approached him earlier now seemed to be watching his every move. Trying to ignore this, James stopped at a large stand displaying the latest game consoles. He couldn't help but smile as he imagined himself playing on one of them, immersed in a fantasy world. He didn't care how others looked at him, because he was here for his dream. Suddenly, he was interrupted again by the same store employee. He approached James, now with more obvious dissatisfaction in his voice. "Are you looking for something? You've been here for quite some time." James felt his cheeks turn red. He had not expected such a question and tried to remain calm. "No, I'm just looking. These things are very interesting," he said, trying to smile. His gaze was stern, and his tone became even colder. "Watch here for free. If you're not going to buy anything, then maybe you should leave." These words were like a stab in the heart. James felt a wave of indignation and shame wash over him. He looked around and saw that the other store employees were now watching him as well. Some of them were even whispering to each other, and their eyes were directed directly at him. James felt the weight of the situation begin to weigh on him. "But I'm just looking around," he began, but the employee cut him off. "If you're not interested in anything here, I'll ask you to leave the store." James felt tears welling up in his eyes, but he didn't want to cry. He took a deep breath, gathering all his courage, and replied, Okay, I will go. He turned around to leave, but deep down he felt anger and despair. How could his dream, which was so bright and inspiring, end in such humiliation? James no longer felt joy. His steps were heavy and his heart was burdened. When he reached the door, he suddenly heard something like a conversation between an employee and another customer behind him. The words were indistinct, but the tone clearly indicated that they were discussing him. James turned around and saw the employee gesturing and explaining something to his colleague, throwing short glances in his direction. This added to his pain. When he left the store, he stopped and breathed in some fresh air. His face was burning with emotion, but he tried to hold it together. James decided that he would not let this situation break him. He was disappointed, but he also felt determined. Deep down, he knew this was just the beginning. When James left the store, the world around him seemed a little dimmer. The sunlight that had filled his heart with joyful anticipation just a short time ago only emphasized his state of disappointment. He carefully sat down on a bench outside the store, lost in thought. Why had this happened? Had he done something wrong? Could he have avoided being treated this way? His hands were shaking, and he clenched his fists tightly, trying to cope with the wave of emotions that was rolling in again. James could not deny that he was offended and humiliated. Scenes from the store replayed over and over in his mind, from the sharp words of the employee to the whispers of other people in the store. His heart was aching with pain. But at the same time he knew that he did not want to remain a victim. He looked at his reflection in the store's glass window. He didn't see a broken teenager, but someone who had decided that this was just a challenge he was ready to face. His mother always said that the world can be unfair, but it is these injustices that make people stronger. James decided that he would not let this situation define his self-esteem. He took out his old phone and opened the Notes app. His fingers began to type quickly. He wrote about how he felt during the incident, the words that hurt him, and how he wanted to be accepted for who he was without prejudice. I'm not the one who deserves this attitude. I deserve more than that. I want this incident to go unnoticed. He wrote in his notes. The note became a symbol of his determination. It was not just a text. It was his way of turning his pain into something meaningful. He wasn't sure what to do next, but he knew he wanted to act. He felt that this experience could be an opportunity to bring his message to others. When he returned home, James shared his experience with his mother. She listened carefully, not interrupting him. Her face expressed sadness and sympathy, but also pride in the way her son had handled the situation. She hugged him and said, James, the world will not always be fair, but that doesn't mean you have to be silent. Your word carries weight. If you choose to share your experience, you can make a difference in more ways than you know. Her words became a source of inspiration for him. James knew that his mom had always been on his side, but now he felt that she was not just supporting him, but pushing him to take action. He opened his phone again and began to formulate a post for social media. Today I saw how prejudice can manifest itself even where you least expect it, he began. I want to share my experience, not to complain, but to show that no one has the right to devalue another person. He added details about what happened, but avoided making accusations. His main goal was to create a story that could resonate with other people who have experienced similar treatment. When he finished writing the post, he felt a strange peace. It was only the beginning, but for James, this step was important. James's post quickly went viral on social media, triggering a flurry of emotions from his friends, family, and even strangers. His words resonated with many, and people began to leave comments and share their own stories that were similar to James' experience. It was unexpected and even a little scary for him. He didn't expect his voice to find such a response. Among the dozens of comments, James began to notice something important. His story became not just an example of injustice, but a symbol of the struggle for respect and equality. People wrote him words of support, offered advice, and even called for change. Some shared how they had been personally affected by similar situations, some at school, some at work, and some in society at large. One of the highlights was the reaction of a local blogger with thousands of followers. He reposted James' story on his page and wrote, "This shows that even a small voice can make a big difference. Let's support young people who have the courage to speak out against injustice." This post got the attention of many people and greatly expanded James' audience. James started receiving messages from people who wanted to know more about his experience. Some even offered to organize meetings or events where he could speak to others. Although he was a little embarrassed, he felt that his voice really did matter. One of the most touching moments happened when he was approached by a local organization that works on equality and human rights issues. They asked him to become a youth ambassador and help fight discrimination. James was shocked and inspired by the offer. It was hard for him to believe that his story had turned into something so big. During his first meeting with the organization, James felt his feelings shift from confusion to determination. The people who were present listened to him attentively, with warmth and understanding. They supported him, and their words inspired him. James found the strength to share not only his experience but also his dreams and aspirations. "I've always wanted to be an engineer," he said, "but this incident showed me that I can do more than just build devices. I want to create opportunities for people to be heard." These words resonated with the audience. They offered to help James realize his ideas and support him on his journey. He left the meeting feeling that his life was changing and that he was finding new horizons for his struggle. James realized that his experience at the hardware store and the support he received from strangers gave him the strength and inspiration to fight for change. But the fight required concrete action. His story was no longer just a random episode. It was part of a larger picture, part of what he wanted to change in society. It was clear to him that the injustice he faced was affecting not only him but many other people. After meeting with the Human Rights Organization, James decided to do more than just share his story. He began to formulate a plan on how to proceed. Together with a team of activists, he began to develop an initiative that would draw attention to discrimination in customer service. They called the project Voice of Justice. James and his new allies decided to organize a press conference to draw attention to the problem. Several journalists, activists, and ordinary citizens who had heard about James' situation gathered. In a small conference room at a local cultural center, he was a little nervous, but at the same time, he felt confident in his goal. He stood up in front of the audience, took a deep breath, and began to speak. "I am here to tell you about an experience that changed my life. But I wanted to be more than just a story of one day in a hardware store. I wanted to be an occasion for change." His words sounded sincere, and it evoked an emotional response from the audience. James spoke about how bias has affected his life, but also emphasized that every person deserves respect, no matter who they are or where they come from. His speech ended with a call to action. "We must create a society where everyone feels accepted. This is not just my fight. This is a fight for all of us." James also organized a series of workshops and lectures for businesses and citizens. They talked about how prejudice can manifest itself in everyday situations and how to combat it. James was one of the main speakers. He shared not only his story, but also specific ideas on how to change the culture of communication in the field of customer service. It is important to understand that sometimes we do not even realize how prejudice affects our actions, he said at one of the lectures, but if we are willing to learn, we can change it. His words inspired people, and many of the attendees came up to him after the events, thanking him for his work and ideas. James felt his initiative gaining strength with each passing day. One day, James's team received news that became an important milestone in their work. Several large retail companies approached them with a request to develop special trainings for their employees. This was a confirmation that their work was having an impact and producing results. During one of the trainings, James shared his story with the store employees. He talked about how he was a victim of prejudice and how it affected him. His words were touching and made the audience think. One of the employees came up to James after the training and said, "Thank you for your story. It made me look at myself from the outside. I will try to be more attentive to people." For James, these words were further proof that his efforts were paying off. He felt that his experience, although painful, had turned into something meaningful and useful for others.